Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host Frank Acom, and we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. And what a big day. First of all, it's St. Patrick's Day, of course, as you are aware. But also, would today be the 3-year anniversary of stopping the spread? The 15 days to slow down the spread. This has been a long 15 days. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Let me highlight the show for you this morning. We're going to have Assemblyman Phil Palmisano in just a little bit. Looking forward to talking to him because we've been discussing budgets throughout the week. And so we're going to talk to him about all those issues. It's not too late, of course, to contact me and get those questions so I can ask the Assemblyman. There is our contact information up on the screen. And that interview brought to you by M.A. Neal Financial Services. We also have a very special segment. Maggie Hall from our news department, that's Big Fox News at 10. She's going to join us because she visited with Nick Langworthy, our new congressman, yesterday. So she put together a little clip for us so you can see what the congressman is up to here in the Southern Tier. Later on, well, we'll get to some news stories, and we'll get to, obviously, a lot about state issues with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. I did want to mention next week, we're not going to slow down. This has been our first week on the air, and I'm glad that you made us a part of your mornings every weekday morning at 7 a.m. Next week on Monday, a friend to my program, my old radio program, and someone that really helped us out as we speak of COVID today, the 3-year anniversary of stopping the spread. Jack Wheeler, Steuben County Manager, is going to join us on Monday, right around 7:20. He would fill us in and give us all the info in the early days of the pandemic. So Jack Wheeler on Monday. Tuesday, we're going to have representatives from ASSE, and that is exchange student. In the schools. They need, I guess you would call them homes for the students so they can experience America here and experience that wonderful opportunity. So we're going to talk to them, 2 representatives, one who's over here visiting and one who is housing the student. So that'll be on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, we're going to have Chemung County Executive Chris Moss, and on Thursday, Assemblyman Chris Friend. So we have a heck of a lineup next week, just like we had this week. And I want to thank everybody who's agreed to be on the show, this brand new show, Frankly Speaking. So as I mentioned, it is St. Patrick's Day. Please be safe out there. We talked to Sheriff Schramm yesterday, and he sent that same message. I hope that you have fun, though, of course, and enjoy the day. But it's hard to believe that it's been 3 years since the world locked down, and Governor DeSantis was speaking out on this, because I almost forgot about, the curve. You remember all that, 15 days to slow down the spread. Well, the governor, let me take off my contact information. You got that. You can already, and you see the number on the bottom. You can text me any questions you have for the Assemblyman. But Ron DeSantis, and I apologize that I don't have this up on the screen. The site itself was a little wonky. But he said we need accountability, and that's something we've been calling for a long time, many of us. Dr. Fauci seems to not want to get to the bottom of this, or continues to say to us, well, we'll never know. We'll never know what actually happened. So DeSantis saying we need accountability. We need to know everything about the lab leak. And many speculate, and many have said that that's most likely the cause of the lab leak. We need to know about the role of Dr. Fauci and all of this to make sure that he is held accountable. And we just need to resolve that, DeSantis said. Yesterday, we know DeSantis looking like he will be running for president. But we do need more answers on the gain of function. And unfortunately, Dr. Fauci now is suggesting that we're going to need a COVID shot at least once a year. And again, saying we'll never really know where this came from. I think most of us know in our hearts and minds where this came from. So before I run too late, I'm going to take a break, but I'd love to hear your take on it now that we're, I guess you can't say celebrating, but 3 years of the world kind of being turned upside down. I love to hear stories about what those first days were like for everybody. So you can email me, you can call me, and we can get your story. Maybe if we have a chance at the end of the program, we will make sure to read those. Again, if we have a chance, because I want to spend as much time as possible with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. So please stay with us. We're taking our first short break, and then we will be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here in beautiful Marcus Street, Corning. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on The Patriot. You're here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Did my light go off? I hope you can see me okay. My camera light is off. I just wanted to make sure we were on the air. This is WYDC TV Big Fox. And I want to thank you for joining us here in the Hesselson studio. We're going to have Assemblyman Phil Palmisano coming up in just a moment. Before that, our good friend Maggie Hall. She works at Big Fox News at 10. If you haven't caught that, please do. Set your clock. It's a great news product here that we offer on Big Fox. And she was kind enough to, and I attended the event as well, to see our new congressman, Nick Langworthy. He was at CCC. We went to the Elmira location to learn about their welding program. And while we were there, the congressman, of course, talking to the students, talking to the CCC president. It was a really nice and fun event. So Maggie Hall put together just a little package so you could hear directly from the congressman, who we will be having on the show very shortly. So stay with us, because here's Maggie Hall telling us about yesterday's news with the congressman.
Good morning. This is Maggie Hall from Big Fox News at 10. I had the opportunity to talk with freshman Congressman Nick Langworthy yesterday and wanted to share some of that interview with Frank and the folks over here at Frankly Speaking. The congressman visited Elmira to speak with welding students and to learn more about the trades program.
I'm Nick Langworthy, the new member of Congress for the Southern Tier. I'm very proud to represent Steuben, Chemung, and Schuyler counties in the United States House of Representatives as the newly configured 23rd Congressional District.
The congressman spoke with Dr. Bill Mullaney, president of CCC, along with Executive Director Gene Ashbach and Senior Director Tyree Bush of the Workforce Education and Academic Pathways Program, before touring one of the college's welding labs.
So I talked a lot to the president of SUNY Corning along the way, and he was really telling me the great workforce development projects and programs that they have, here in the various campuses of SUNY Corning. I was thrilled to see it in practice. As he told me about it in my office in Washington, I said, I'm going to come out very soon, and I want to see this welding program. I want to see the police academy, the machine shop, all these things. And as I go tour employers in factories and machine shops around, they're all saying they need skilled workers.
The congressman promised to continue to pursue the federal grants and funding that make these trade programs possible.
What you're seeing, they turn out 20 plus fully certified welders every single program here, and it's because this asset is here at SUNY Corning that they're able to do this. This was created by federal grants. We're going to continue to pursue federal grants for SUNY Corning so they can expand their mission.
To learn more about the workforce education and trade programs offered at SUNY Corning, just visit corning-cc.edu. Thanks so much to Frank for inviting me on the show this morning. You can watch me, Maggie Hall, on our nightly news broadcast every weekday at 10. Back to you, Frank.
Thank you, Maggie. Great job. The congressman in town, and as I said, we are in talks to have him scheduled on the program very soon, and it was nice to see him in our area. Okay, this is Frankly Speaking. As I said, I'm your host, Frank Acom, and this is the Hesselson studio. Earlier I mentioned, oh my goodness, we're running late already. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, a little bit more news, and Assemblyman Phil Palmisano coming up in just moments. So please stay with us here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Coming up in just a moment, we will be talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. I always look forward to talking with Phil. So much to cover. Not too late to get your last minute questions in. See that number at the bottom of the screen? Just text me there or leave a message. One quick story before we go to break. A couple quick, I should say. We mentioned earlier that this is essentially the 3-week anniversary. 3-year anniversary of COVID. Unbelievable to think of what the world looked like when we had to stop the spread and the ups and downs that we've all been through. And we mentioned that Dr. Fauci and others not intellectually curious about where the coronavirus originated. Kind of a shrug of the shoulders. Oh, I guess we'll never know because of that gain of function connection that Dr. Fauci has. And of course, many of us believe that it was a lab leak from China. And the reason I have this up on the screen just it was a tie-in with China. China's president Xi Jinping is going to visit Moscow for, I guess, to show support for Putin. Now, why do I think this is important? It's something I've heard a lot of conversation about, especially in the past. We have to keep in mind that there has been documents released where China specifically, with the help of Russia, looking to become essentially the world's superpower. We know that the power they have with the supply chain, we saw that not that long ago. And this could be, and I don't like to make predictions on the show, I never have, but this is what I'll be watching for. How about I put it that way? I'll be watching for what that conversation looks like. Because if Xi Jinping comes to Russia and says, let's stop what's going on in Ukraine, they solve it, does that not make them, or at least in their mind, the world's superpower? They were able to end the war when others couldn't. I think their ultimate goal is to be a superpower, and that would be their argument going forward. So I'm going to be watching this closely, and you may say, well, that's conspiratorial. I don't think so. If you look at some of the documents coming out, some of the intelligence documents, it seems to me where this raises some red flags, or at least piques my curiosity. So I mentioned that just quickly, and I'd love to get your take on it. Obviously, Ukraine, the war with Ukraine is chosen by Russia. It is, it's horrible. It's tough to watch. It's difficult to watch. So we will, and it says in this piece from the New York Post that will be the dominant discussion. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that visit. I wanted to mention this at a more local level. Why don't we say local level? Here we go. Just something to keep in mind this weekend if you're a little bored. We can see, and this is coming from the Times-Union, that in upstate New York, this weekend on Saturday, you have a chance to see a rocket launch attempt. Of course, we need clear skies, but that would be right around no earlier than 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's going to be taking off at Wallops Island, Virginia. It's been postponed in the past, but if you are bored or you're looking out in the sky tomorrow, if it's dark, give it a look. I thought that was just a kind of an interesting story. So we have other things we'll be getting to later on in the program, but I know we have the Assemblyman coming up in just a little bit. I will check my last-minute text if you have any questions for him, because I know there's a lot going on in Albany that he's going to fill us in on, and kind of piggyback off some of our past interviews this week where we discussed New York politics. So we really look forward to talking to the Assemblyman. And of course, that interview is brought to you by M.A. Neal Financial Services. Thank you to all our guests this week. This was our first week, and I think we're doing a fantastic job here, technically speaking. We're improving every day. The Assemblyman coming in here in just a moment. I see him walking up, so I got to unlock the door here. There we go. We got a special button. So the Assemblyman, good morning. We're live on the air, so don't cuss, okay? Okay, just kidding. But the Assemblyman is here. If you want to sit down, Phil, whenever. So we will take a short break, and when we come back, we'll discuss with the Assemblyman a lot about Albany, about the budgets, and much, much more. I'm going to check those last-minute texts. Again, the number on the bottom of the screen. It's not too late. This is Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, so stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Whoa, I got my levels up a little high. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio here on beautiful Market Street. And joining us in the studio this morning, the brand new studio, we have Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Good morning, Phil.
Frank, good morning. Good to be with you.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm really happy for you.
It's a different world, isn't it? Look at all the cameras, and it's a
definitely.
little different. I'm going to actually move your camera. This is the kind of stuff, this kind of stuff I have to worry about on the fly. Okay, we have a lot to get to. We've been talking about the budgets all week, but before we get to that, I know that you recently visited Rikers. Could you tell us a little bit about that event?
Yes, I serve on the Corrections Committee, and I've toured a lot of state correctional facilities, but I ran into the advocate for the corrections unions down in New York City for Rikers, which is so I said I'd really like to come see that, because you hear a lot of stories about what's going on there. They're proposing to close it down in the future,
right,
in New York City, which it holds like 6,000 people. Their plan is to replace it with 4 borough prisons, to construct 4 prisons in the boroughs. And the interesting thing about that is it only holds a maximum of 3,300 people. So if there's 6,000 people in there now, where's those other thousands going to go? So that was interesting. But the problem we saw more than anything, Frank, is there's a staffing violence, safety, and security crisis going on at that facility. It was myself and 6 other colleagues from our caucus that went down there to the tour. The thing is, they've lost 40% of their workforce, over 3,000 workers since 2019. And I didn't even realize on top of it, 40% of their staff, more than 40% of their staff is female staff. Wow. And they've been under attack on a regular basis. I mean, in the past couple of years, they've had over 40 sexual assaults.
That's horrible.
And what I learned, I didn't realize this, I should have known this, but a sexual assault against a corrections officer in New York State is a misdemeanor. It's not a felony.
How is that possible?
That's exactly what I thought, and I was blown away by that number.
That's horrible.
To think about that, and what we've seen too, not just in our state correctional facilities, but in the facilities down there, the violence and assaults, staff on staff assaults, or inmate on staff assaults and inmate on inmate assaults are up dramatically across the state, especially since the implementation of the HALT Act. Now, the HALT Act basically restricts and limits the use of segregated confinement to segregate the most violent inmates from the rest of the general population. And it's usually a small percentage that are doing that, but advocates pushed for this and got this through to restrict the use of that. And we see it going on in our correctional facilities here. And since then, in April's implementation, assaults have increased 24% inmate on staff, 36% inmate on inmate, more than 300 more than last year. So it's a record high, over 1,400 assaults, 300 more than last year in both categories. And in Rikers, a big thing that happens down there is since 2020, in 2020, there was like 129 stabbings. In the end of 2022, it was up to 491 stabbings. There's a staffing crisis. I mean, some of these individuals are working triple shifts. I mean, now you're seeing more and more of them retiring or resigning because of their safety and security. And who can blame them? And I mean, when you think about those numbers, I mean, it's pretty
staggering.
It's pretty staggering. It's a dangerous place to work, and we need to support them and secure them and make sure they're getting paid a good wage to be there. But it's a dangerous job.
We talked to both the Chemung County Sheriff, Bill Schramm, and of course Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard the other day. They're destitute for corrections officers. They're saying anybody coming, we'll do the best to get you the job because they need people. It's a safety issue, number one.
Yes, I mean, and you see even in our correctional facilities up here, whether it's county or state, we see more and more people leaving the job here, and because they go to work and they don't know if they're going to get attacked, if they're going to get feces thrown on them, slashed, and it's just so. But to see that at Rikers, the 7 jails down there, and their plan is to close it down and build 4 in the boroughs. That's going to reduce. It only holds 3,300 people. What's going to happen to the 6,000? And the Commissioner of Corrections for the city said that they're if nothing changes with our criminal justice laws, it could be as many as 7,000 in that facility next year. So there's our correctional facilities across this state are at a crisis. We need to let our corrections officers know that we have their back. Unfortunately, the policies that keep being implemented by this governor and that progressive socialist legislature not just stabs them in the back, stabs them right into their face. And it's just unfortunate because it's just kind of the criminal justice policies we see in the state. It continues to favor the criminal over law enforcement. It's long past due that we start to put the safety and interests of our law enforcement, our corrections officers, in public safety ahead of the interests of murderers and rapists.
100%. And again, talking to the sheriffs, bail reform, I know you and I have discussed it at length, but when you talk about this bail reform that ties the hands of the police and gives a pass to the criminals, and Governor Hochul tried to add a little bit of language and then it's completely ignored or completely glanced over.
It's like down on arrival with this progressive legislature, and really what Governor Hochul proposed is a little bit of a step in the right direction, but it's not enough.
And even that was not accepted.
No, exactly. I mean, the fact of the matter is, no one ever said there shouldn't have been changes to the bail reform laws. We didn't say that, but when they passed this, they never consulted with our law enforcement, never consulted with our DAs, our stakeholders who have to deal with this and the implications this would have. And so now what we really need to have is you need to have a dangerousness standard. We are right now, because of the laws they passed in 2019, we are the only state in the nation that does not allow a judge to consider the dangerousness of an individual before releasing them to the public. So what we see is it's a catch and release program.
It is.
You see inmates, or you see offenders going into prison and then laughing and saying, "Hey, I'll see you this afternoon," and they commit repeat crimes. I mean, in New York State, that shows people that are waiting on crimes. It's a 40% repetitive race. 45% in the cities. I mean, same thing with raise the age. I mean, when they passed these laws to make juvenile offenders, 16 and 17-year-olds now, if they commit murder, if they commit rape, they don't go into a correctional facility. They go into a juvenile detention center or go through the family court system. I mean, that's just crazy. And it's just out of touch. Now you see, gangs giving these young kids the guns to say, you shoot the gun, you're not going to go to jail. You're going to go to family court.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just out of touch, out of control policy that's being directed and supported, unfortunately, by this governor. You would think, being from upstate, she would understand that or want to look out for the safety and care of our law enforcement and our public safety. But these policies aren't enough, and this progressive socialist legislature is just continuing to put the interests of criminals, murderers, rapists over the interests of public safety, law enforcement, and our crime victims.
Phil, I asked this of the sheriffs, and I don't know if we really have an answer. What's the end game? Why are they coddling criminals so much when poll after poll shows that public safety is ranked right at the top? I mean, everybody's talking about the safety of their families, the safety of their friends. What's the end game? I don't understand it.
Frank, I really don't know. I mean, we've tried, we've screamed, we've had press conferences. We continue to beat the drum on this. And the election that we just passed, I mean, Lee Zeldin almost won election to governor over this issue with public safety and, of course, the affordability crisis that's going on in our state. Unfortunately, New York City, and there's more of these progressive socialists that are advancing this agenda, and it's not safe. I mean, I think those individuals in the cities want to be safe. I mean, the crime rate in New York City is staggering. I mean, the shooting incidents, both in all our cities across the state over the past few years, has been skyrocketing. I mean, that's not a safe place to live. And I just think that they just think, well, we can address crime, but they don't want to address crime. And usually when it's addressing crime, it's usually going after the rights of law-abiding citizens, like our legal gun owners. And I remind people that people who commit crimes with guns aren't going out and buying the gun at the store. They're basically stealing it, and most of those crimes that are illegally obtained from out of state.
I know it's sad when we are attacking not only the police, we're attacking the law-abiding citizens and letting like I told Sheriff Schramm yesterday, the ink's not even dry on the paperwork sometimes, and these guys are already on the street committing another crime, and that means there's victims out there that should not have been victims.
Absolutely, and it's sad. I mean, I think maybe once one of their family members are hurt or killed, maybe then you'll see a change of heart on some of these policies. But until then, I don't know what to say. But we're going to continue to advocate. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is why elections have consequences.
100%.
If you don't vote, if you don't get involved, if you don't stand up, then that's what we're facing with this. What we're facing in New York State.
I mean, I read the New York Post frequently. It's terrifying. When you have family and friends that live in the city, you read that, and it's like something out of a bad horror movie.
Right.
It's that scary.
And that's why I go back to that statistic. A sexual assault against someone else is going to be a felony, but a sexual assault against the corrections officer is a misdemeanor.
Doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't at all. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano is our guest. This interview brought to you by M.A. Neal Financial Services. Let's lighten up the mood a little bit, because I look forward to seeing the press release on this every year, and that's the press conference you did for CHIPS and had all the highway guys in Albany.
Oh, yes. I mean, this was great to have them. Actually, this was the first time we were able to have them
I was wondering
in a couple
if
of years, because 3 years since CHIPS. With COVID, the last time they were there was
right around
March,
that time.
March in 2020. We were kind of laughing about it that week.
Wow.
That first week of March, there was like 600 plus highway superintendents on the steps with us. A week later, it was closed down. So it was probably that event we had would have been classified as a super spreader, but it's important, and it was good to have them all back. And we did the press conferences the past 2 years to highlight the issue, but it was nice to have 600 plus highway guys with their orange shirts on the annual Local Roads Are Essential, Local Roads Matter campaign. And this was the 11th year we've done that. We've been doing it since 2013. And to have that issue, just trying to focus on the importance of investing in our local infrastructure. And unfortunately, what we see, Frank, when it comes to our infrastructure spending, we saw it in the one-house budget we passed yesterday, and we saw it with the governor's proposal. They're talking proposing increasing spending or operating aid for the MTA by $500 million to a total of $4.3 billion state support. But yet the one-house budget that they proposed increased funding for our local infrastructure by $100 million. The governor had no funding increases for local infrastructure. And I get that the MTA is the lifeblood of the downstate transportation network. I support the MTA funding because we have businesses right here like CAF, Alston Mower and Hornell that has a great workforce that produces like the high-speed rail that we've seen going on in the Northeast, the rail manufacturer cars that is going on there, but for the New York City and areas, other mass transit. So that's a good thing. But just as MTA is the lifeblood of our downstate transportation network, CHIPS is the lifeblood of our upstate transportation network. Sometimes CHIPS funding is the only money our local communities have to fix their local roads, bridges, and culverts. And the fact of the matter is there's a tremendous construction inflation rate impact that's impacting them from 2020 to 2022 of July. We've seen asphalt prices increase 80%, steel up to 115%, and fuel costs up over 260%. That's eating away at any aid that we provide them. That aid that they're proposing in the one house budget is eating away. We need to make it significant. And every dollar we invest in the CHIPS program is one less dollar that comes from the local property taxpayer. And CHIPS affects everyone. It affects New York City, Long Island. Everyone benefits from. There's a formula that works for that. And 87% of the roads in New York State are owned and maintained by our local municipalities. 52% of the 18,000 bridges are owned and maintained by our local municipalities, and 48% of the roads people are driving on a local roads. So that needs to be. We need some parity with the MTA. We need some, and it's just long overdue. I think. I mean, we talk about safety. We talk about safety. How many of us kids put our kids on? How many of us put our kids on a school bus every morning that goes over a local road or bridge? God forbid one of those were to collapse. I mean, we need to be proactive, not reactive. I mean, the numbers that come out, the unmet need, over $20 billion in unmet need. The comptroller has said the roads are worse and deficient and getting worse. So we need to put an attention on that issue. And I think this is a year we could do it. The resources are there to do it from the perspective of if we balance and prioritize our funding, because budgeting is all about priorities. It's a statement of where your priorities are from a legislature and from an executive. And what we see from priorities, one of the priorities coming out of the legislature of this governor is to increase the Hollywood film tax credit to $700 million from $420 million.
That'll do it. Yeah.
So so basically we're going to subsidize the Hollywood millionaires. I mean, when our roads and bridges are crumbling, we can't increase funding for that, but we can increase it for Hollywood millionaires. We can't help our most vulnerable citizens, developmentally disabled, by making sure the direct support professionals who are tasked with providing their quality of care and improving their quality of life with wages that are sustainable, rather than seeing them leave them to go to work for McDonald's or Taco Bell or Burger King. I mean, that just shows misplaced priorities, and we can work within the context of this budget to do the right thing. But their answer is basically tax and spend policies, out of control spending, and that's what we saw in the one house document that we did yesterday.
And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. We got to take a short break. You don't mind staying with us, do you, Phil?
Not at all.
All right. This is a M.A. Neal Financial Services interview. We're broadcasting live from Hesselson Studio. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson Studio on Marcus Street in Corning. This interview brought to you by M.A. Neal Financial Services. Phil, isn't this a beautiful studio?
I love it, Frank. This is great. This is pretty exciting.
I know. All the lights, camera, action. But it's hard to believe, and we're going to talk about the budget, but you touched on it earlier, and it's a story I brought up at the beginning. Can you believe it's been 3 years since we stopped the spread? The 15 days?
Oh, I know, right?
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Because, I mean, St. Patrick's Day, of course, today, and everybody stay safe out there. But you
happy
remember
St.
what
Patrick's
happened?
Day.
3 years. 3 years ago, right? We were all locked down. It's hard to believe. Time flies, I guess.
Yes.
So let's talk about the budget. We've discussed it all week, but there's so much, well, like we used to do, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What do you see?
Well, obviously the governor put out her budget back in January, and that was just a starting point, we tell people. Then we went through a month of budget hearings that wrapped up the end of February, and then this week the budget negotiations start because the two houses passed their one house budget resolutions, basically reflected their priorities and their blueprint and wish list, what they would like to see for the budget. And all that I could say is what the Assembly wish list was not in the best interest of New Yorkers. First of all, the one house budget spent $233 billion. That's $6 billion more than the governor and $11 billion more than last year. And their answer is to increase taxes, increase uncontrolled spending. We have a debt problem. The comptroller recently came out and said our debt's projected to increase by 42% over the next 5 years by $2.5 billion. And the governor and this progressive legislature, socialist legislature, is advancing an energy policy that's irrational, unattainable, and certainly it's unaffordable and costly. It's unreliable, and certainly not green. The only thing green about it is the green dollars is going to cost New Yorkers, increase taxes and increase electricity rates, and it's going to burden our families, our seniors, our farmers, our small businesses, our manufacturers, and quite frankly, it's just continue the exodus of New Yorkers that we see leaving the state. And right now, New York already has the highest taxes in the nation, the worst business climate in the nation. And the document that the Assembly majority passed, which is pretty similar to the governor's, basically is an out-of-touch tone-deaf policy that's just going to tax and spend, which doesn't work, and it's going to continue to the struggles of families. I mean, where gas prices are still up,
Everything.
heating costs are high, inflation is still there. We need to provide relief, and we need to buckle down and control our spending like families and businesses are doing now. But their answer is to continue to increase spending and rely on the top tax earners to pay more and more. But that doesn't work.
It's not sustainable.
No,
we
because
keep
you
doing
see
it.
this
Everybody
mass exodus of people. And I'll just give you, if I could,
Yes.
just on the income side of it. In 2020, New York City, they lost 3.57 million New Yorkers who had an average income of 140,000. That was replaced by 3.5 million New Yorkers with an average income of $80,000. That was a net loss of 70,000 people, but that equated to a net loss of $34 billion in taxable income.
Wow.
According to Tax and Finance, people who came into our state and then left our state, the same type of thinking, we had a net loss of $19.5 billion in taxable income in 2021 with a net loss of nearly 250,000 New Yorkers. So, I mean, that doesn't work.
No.
That's an unsustainable program because the rich already pay the highest proportion of taxes, and like I said, we have the highest taxes in the nation. And what I said on the Florida and One House debate, wouldn't you rather have 10.3% of $5 million than 10.8% of zero? Wouldn't you rather have 11.8% of 25 million instead of 10? Wouldn't you rather have 10.8% of 25 million instead of 11.4% of zero?
Exactly.
And that's what's going to happen, because ultimately, and the federal money is running out. So how are you going to plug that holes? And all they continue to advocate for are tax and spend policies, which is going to continue to put us into an economic doldrum, and it's just going to continue the mass exodus of people we see leaving the state. The rich can afford to leave the state and move, and they are. And those numbers, those taxable income loss numbers we see show that, and that's just going to be the trajectory of our course. And ultimately, there's going to come a time when we're going to have to cut spending for some of these programs that they continue to spend wildly on, instead of tightening their belts. I mean, families, businesses, they have to tighten their belts.
Right.
And what are we doing as a state? We're not. They just think it's their money. And they forget it's the taxpayers' money. It's not their money.
No, that's the big problem. We got to take another short break, Phil. So please stay with us, everyone. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services interview, and we're broadcasting live from Hesselson Studios. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. You see beautiful Marcus Street behind Phil in the interview screen. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services interview with the Assemblyman. Phil, we have a lot to cover, and the show's going quick as it always does. We were discussing the budget. We were talking about population loss, and one thing we talked about earlier in the week is energy, whether it's filling your gas tank, or whether it's your heating bills. This year, how many people have you ran into who said, I can't afford this bill that I just received? So what are we in New York State and in Albany doing to deal with this energy crisis, essentially?
Well, unfortunately, what the administration, what the progressive left, socialist left, and are advancing as a policy that's really going to make your energy policy less affordable, much more costly, and certainly not as reliable.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. When individuals talk about their energy bills, they want it to be affordable and reliable. Businesses, they want their energy to be affordable and reliable. And if they can't get affordable and reliable here in New York, they're going to go someplace else where they get affordable and reliable energy.
Insult to injury, right?
Right.
What
And
we were
listen,
talking
the
earlier.
push here in New York State is to be totally green. And let me tell you, green is not so green, but that's a whole other issue we can talk about another time.
We will, yes.
Other than the green, it's going to cost tax dollars, but it's not green. It's not environmentally sound either. But the problem is the plan is in New York State when we passed legislation back in 2019 called the CLCPA, it's the Community Climate and Leadership Protection Act, as they refer to it. It's basically the Green New Deal for New York, to get to zero net emissions from generation by 2040. And some other goals by 2030, like 70% of our generation by 2030 for renewable. That's attainable. 2040, zero emission generation by 2040 is not attainable, and it's risking the affordability and reliability of the grid. There's a lot in the news about banning gas stoves. You heard a few weeks ago, and Governor Hochul says it's not going to happen. The one issue that I've been the most scared about, that I talk about over and over again, is the proposal that came out of this Climate Action Council that had to make recommendations to the legislature to advance to meet these energy goals. The one that scares me the most is to think about this perspective. Like, and I'm just going to use natural gas as an example. 60% of the people in New York State heat their homes with natural gas. 40% of our generation comes from natural gas. We're not talking about propane or oil. Just this. What they're proposing to do is, come 2030, if you heat your home with natural gas, instead of if your boiler or furnace goes, normally you replace your boiler or furnace. At that point in time, you wouldn't be able to replace your boiler or furnace. You would have to fully electrify your home. What would that entail? An air source heat pump or a geothermal heat pump. And an air source heat pump is not as reliable in the cold weather temperatures. You would need to have a backup type of generation. But what are you going to use? You're not going to be able to use natural gas or propane or oil. But a geothermal heat pump is more reliable, but it's very, very expensive. It requires construction underground. And that, the estimates on them are 35, 40,000 plus to get one of those. Now they're talking about tax credits, but it's still significant. Estimates, 3 different estimates. One from the Consumer Energy Alliance said to go do full electrification, it would cost the average homeowner more than $35,000 to convert. The Climate Action Council, which developed their plan, said it would cost $20,000 to $50,000. And another organization out in Western New York, where they get cold weather, said it would cost, because of their aging housing stock, it would cost $40,000 to $50,000 plus. Who can afford that?
It's bad enough when you lose a furnace or hot water heater.
Right.
What are you going to do when all of a sudden that happens? People are going to go without heat, essentially.
Yes, I mean, and they say there's tax credits and rebates. Well, think about a senior citizen. If they're not paying taxes, if they're on a fixed income, they're not going to benefit from a tax credit. The rebates they're not going to benefit from. You still have to come up with that money up front. I think most people would rather spend that money to help their grandchild or their kid go to school versus having to pay to convert their full home over to electric. And it's not just dealing with the heat pump. It's talking about you have to improve the shell of your property, your insulation, your windows, your doors. You'd have to improve your electric upgrades because the demand on the grid is going to be so significant.
Rebuild your house, essentially.
Basically, because you're talking about, and right now, because then you also have the electric vehicle mandate that come 2035. All new vehicles have to be electric. Our school buses come 2027. Every new school bus has to be electric. And think about this: a school bus right now for our school, and I've talked to students, they're panicking about this. Sure. And the state of New York's not providing any relief. They're saying just kind of keep moving forward. We're not going to study this. A regular school bus right now with bells and whistles might cost about $120,000, $125,000. An electric school bus right now costs over $400,000. And then there's range issues because you can't go as far in some of these areas. We're in a very rural area, and the size and driving around, you're going to need more school buses to do it. You have to deal with charging infrastructure. I mean, that's just a significant cost. So the cost, and that's just on the conversion cost, the infrastructure cost, and we're not even talking about your rates. You're paying higher rates, and the reliability is a challenge to the grid. I mean, the NYSO, which is tasked with making sure that we can keep the lights on and the power on, have raised the red flag that said we need to have by 2040 27 to 45 gigawatts of dispatchable emission resources. Now, I'm using technology. A gigawatt, this 1 gigawatt is the equivalent of powering 750,000 homes. Wow. Right now, our generating capacity in New York State with natural gas, nuclear is about 41 gigawatts. They're saying we have to meet this mandate of full electrification, we will have to triple our capacity to 111 gigawatts. And when they say 27 to 45 are dispatchable means 24/7. That means like nuclear or natural gas can run 24/7. Wind and solar is not dispatchable because it's intermittent. You can't rely on it. It doesn't work if the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. And that's going to be a very dangerous thing. It threatens the reliability of the grid. It threatens our affordability, and it's a big problem. And all this is being done in the name of climate change to save our planet. And the problem is, Frank, and to our listeners, this only affects New York State. It doesn't affect Ohio, Pennsylvania. It certainly doesn't affect China, India, Russia. And here's the statistic that means the most. New York contributes 0.4%. That's 0.4% of total global emissions. China contributes 29%, has 1,000 coal plants and building more. And they announced several weeks ago that they're expanding their coal capacity by 70 gigawatts over the next year after 45 gigawatts of expansion next year. Do we really think China, India, and Russia are going to help us meet our goals? In India, I mentioned India, Russia. India is 7% of our global emissions. Russia's 4%. those three constitute 40% of our total global emissions. New York is 0.4%. But yet we're going to put this on the back of all New Yorkers. No other states are going to ban heating with natural gas or gas stoves.
Yeah.
And make people to convert their home and pay $40,000 to convert. So this is unsustainable. It's unachievable, and no one's saying we can't move forward towards a cleaner energy policy. I'm all for renewable energy sources, and when I talk about my opposition, my opposition to the CLCPA is not that we shouldn't invest in renewable technology. We should, and we are, but we should have a diversified energy portfolio of, yes, wind and solar and geothermal, or wind, solar, and hydro, but also natural gas and nuclear. Just like your 401k, you don't invest all in stocks, cash, and bond. You diversify it to protect it. We need to do the same thing with our energy policy in New York State, and we're not.
Let's talk about this more, Phil. Not today because we're completely out of time, but let's have something in the schedule so we can just focus on this, because this is going to be a major issue that affects all of us.
It's a major issue, and the public really is not aware of what's coming down the track. It's a runaway freight train, and the public really doesn't understand it. And we need to educate people more about it.
It is. Phil, thanks so much for being on the first week of Frankly Speaking.
This has been an honor. Frank. I'm happy for you. This is exciting.
All right, Phil. We'll talk to you soon then, all right?
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back. Thank you again to M.A. Neal Financial Services for sponsoring this interview. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. We have to take another short break in just a moment, but I want to put my contact information up if there's anything you need from me. Oh, by the way, I made a joke yesterday or 2 days ago with Joe Sempolinsky on. I do have more than 3 ties. So the outpouring of ties, though I really appreciate it, I think I'm good on ties for a little while. But again, thank you to everybody who reached out. So let's take that short break, and then we're going to wrap up Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I want to thank everybody who joined us this week, the first week of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I hope everyone has a safe and fun St. Patrick's Day, and I'd love to hear your stories. Let me put that contact information up one last time. You can tell us your stories of where you were 3 years ago when we stopped the spread, or started to stop the spread 3 years ago. I'd like to hear those stories of what your last time out in the real world looked like, so you can contact me at that information there. And all week I've received such amazing texts and amazing emails, and I'm so glad to be a part of this community, and so glad that you've welcomed me and made this a part of your 7 a.m. Routine before you go into work. So just before because we are out of time for today's edition, again, a thank you to everybody who sent me ties. I am good for a few lifetimes of ties, and I did want to remind you, let me take the contact information down, because I want to remind you, coming up right after the program, let me see if that's it. Yes, Coffee with the Chief and Sheriff Allard and Chief Spaulding will be at Wegmans starting right after this program, so make sure you make it out. And we want to thank everybody who was our guest this week. And thank you to Assemblyman Phil Palmisano for being on the program this morning. That does it for us today. We'll be back Monday morning starting at 7 a.m. Thanks again to M.A. Neal Financial Services for sponsoring the interview. And thank you to Hesselson's for being our studio sponsor, because we've been broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio with Frankly Speaking.